Hello, my name is Owen. Today we're doing a quick review of Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles. What I want to do is give a brief overview of the book's about, tell you things that I liked, and tell you the things that I didn't like. Jumping straight into it, this book is a retelling of the legend of Achilles, the story from the Odyssey originally, about like this Greek hero who's like an invincible great fighter in like the siege of Troy, and, like Helen and Paris and like all that, like the love, the battle, the intrigue. I wasn't super familiar with it. I haven't read the Odyssey before, and I knew like the details of like, oh, Achilles was invincible, but then like his Achilles heel, like he was dipped in the river, because like I read like Percy Jackson growing up, and I knew like I've seen the movie Troy like with like Brad Pitt, but I like don't remember it, so I didn't remember all the plot details. But this is a retelling from the point of view of Achilles' best friend, and in this book, lover, Patroclus, and like from the journey of like when they were kids and like when they met and like growing up. So it's really like a full telling of like Achilles' life and like the birth of his legend through the eyes of like his like of the person who loved the most, essentially. I listened to this book in an audiobook. I had like a really long drive this past week, so I just really got it done in like only a couple days. And jumping straight into the things that I liked, it's an extraordinarily great story. Now, we can't give Madeline Miller all the credit because obviously like the groundwork was done by Homer thousands of years ago. And man, do Greek legends have some banger storylines. As like the plot was unfolding, I remembered more and more about like this lore and like how it ends up and stuff like that. But it's just a fantastic story. Those Greeks, they really knew how to cook up something good, didn't they? Something that's like epic, but it's like tragedy and it's sad and it's filled with meaning and morals and stuff like that. But to Madeline Miller's credit, she does a fantastic job of taking the meat of the story and giving it in a very easy to consume, entertaining, fast paced, engaging for a modern audience way that I thought was like not confusing at all, because there's like a lot of like Greek names and a lot of characters, and I'm sure the Odyssey, while I'm sure it's a classic. It is a classic. Well, I'm sure it's great, and I actually would really like to read it after reading this book. I'm sure it's not as concise, it's not as easy to understand, and not like as like efficiently presented as Madeline Miller does. And also, all the things that she adds, like with the point of view of Patroclus and like the emotional conflict, she absolutely nails it, and she does a fantastic job at adding that stuff. I did not know of the character of Patroclus at all, and I had to like Google whether or not like he was made up for the story before it, like obviously towards the end it becomes a little bit more obvious that like obviously he was ingrained in this legend, because then like I remembered. But like the book starts all the way when like Patroclus is a kid and like he meets Achilles, and like basically they become like close friends, and it morphs into a romantic relationship. And it's just really, really fantastically done. And coupled with like the twists of like the original Greek story and like the emotional groundwork that Madeline Miller does, it's just a very easy read, a very engaging read, and like such a heart-wrencher, their love story. And I would say, like, moving over a little bit to things that I didn't like, the only problem I had with the story was like in the middle, it got a little unfocused, I feel like, and that is because of one of its strengths, in that it's based on this Greek legend. Because while she did add a lot, and she added a lot of character work, there is a certain framework that she had to follow. There's beat that she needed to hit. There is aspects of Achilles' character that needed to be incorporated. So she needed to find a way to incorporate this romance, which is like always implied, or at best implied by scholars, that these two are in a romantic relationship, but like never like explicitly stated from what I've read. It just felt at times that like Patroclus, because there was so much going on in Achilles' story, that there was parts of the story where he had nothing going on other than just thinking about how much he loved Achilles and how much he just thought about Achilles all day. And like he would do things, but it's like doing it only for Achilles. And in the beginning, there was none of that at all, because I'm pretty sure like most of it had to have been created by the author completely from scratch, like especially like before Patroclus met Achilles. But at the beginning, he's a very complex character. Like he didn't get approval from his parents. He was exiled. He was not a great warrior. He was very bitter. He was very angry. And a very slight spoiler for the beginning of the book, he gets exiled because he killed a kid on accident. And it seems like this trauma will be a part of his character. But as like Achilles grows into the legend and like the parts that are famous of his story, Patroclus takes a back seat in a lot of ways, and his character only becomes focused on serving Achilles, and he loses a little bit of that intrigue that made us engaged to him as a character and made Achilles like attracted to him as a person to begin with. So in a way, like, the main character kind of gets lost in the shadow of Achilles. Now, the book is called A Song of Achilles, and Achilles is an extraordinarily famous character. So it makes sense why this happens, but it just leads to points of the book where, like, Patroclus, the character, isn't where the action is. He's not with Achilles all the time. So there's parts, especially, like, I would say, like, like, from the half of the book to, like, maybe, like, towards the end, like, the ending is fantastic. But there's a period in that second half where it's just Patroclus not where the action is, and he's not doing anything interesting because he can't do anything too interesting without changing the plot of the actual legend. So in a way, like, it's unfortunate that the narrator has to take a back seat where he can't even narrate the cool stuff that's happening. He just has to think about it. Then, like, Achilles comes back and, like, tells him what happened. He's like, oh, wow, that stinks. Sit in the camp, sit in the camp, sit in the camp. Oh, wow, that's amazing that happened that I wasn't there for. But that being said, if you know how the story ends with Patroclus and Achilles, it's worth it to build to that climax. And me having forgotten it, it was a wonderful payoff. So even though it's a little bit slow in that second half, the beginning of that second half, it definitely pays off. And it has a perfect blend of, like, I'd say the first half is more heavily romance. It's more heavily their relationship and, like, building their love, which I think was probably my favorite part of the book, is when they're young and when they're figuring, like, themselves out and they're discovering that they're in love with each other. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And then it starts to go into, like, the famous part, the war, the siege. And while there are some slow parts in there, the action is great. The action is enthralling. We get to see some combat scenes. And like the ending of the story in real life, the ending of the book is fantastic. And Miller does a fantastic job in connecting the themes of their relationship with how the story ends up, without giving you a spoiler, even though the story is thousands of years old. And I easily could, but I won't, because that's rude, and I didn't know. And I feel like it added a lot. And particularly there's the end of Achilles' story, but the end of Patroclus' story at the end of the book, I think, was extraordinarily beautiful. And although it involved a character who I saw no point of, not that I see no point of, but I really just did not care for the way that storyline ends up at the very end, it's to die for. It's certainly a heart-wrencher. I wouldn't say I got, like, super emotional. I've heard people, like, cry at this book, like they get, like, super invested in it and they get really sad. To me, it's just like a classic Greek tragedy to me. And it was certainly sad, but it's just a great story, man. Those Greeks, I can't get over it, man. They really knew, they were really cooking up something. Someone should give them the props they deserve, because I don't think anybody has before. All right? As usual, I go off track at the end. But someone's got to give them credit, right? Who else? Yeah, thanks for sticking around.